There are several commands that we can use in order to verify our virtual port channels are configured correctly. The first thing that we want to check is to make sure that vPC is enabled, and we can do that by doing a show feature command. The second one is a very generic command called show vPC, which gives us a bunch of great information. There's also a more brief mode of that command, which is show vPC brief. I can see individual VPCs by saying show VPC and the VPC number, as well as I can check to make sure that my VPC configuration is the same on both sides, as well as some important switch configurations are the same on both sides by doing a show VPC consistency parameters global. Another great command is the show VPC role to see who is the primary and who is the secondary, as well as I may want to see all of my configuration in relation to VPC, and I can do a show running config VPC. So let's go take a look at some of these commands on the actual device. The first command that I want to input is the show feature command, and in this case I'm going to trim down what I see here by including only the features that say VPC, and here I can see that my VPC feature is enabled. Next, I might type show VPC, and here I can see the status of my VPC domain. I can see that I'm using domain ID 1, that my peer link is up and the peer adjacency is formed. I can see that my peer keep alive is good, and the status is that the other side is alive and I can reach it, as well as I can see that my configurations are consistent. I don't have any consistency errors. I can see the VPC role of this device is a secondary, and I can see whether other features are enabled or disabled. I can also see the status of my peer link, which port channel it's using, and which VLANs are allowed on that port channel. Once again, I need to include all of the VLANs that any VPC member ports are using on that VPC peer link. Finally, I can also see my different VPC ports, the IDs, and the port channels they're using, as well as whether they're up or down and which active VLANs are on those links. Now I might want a more brief version of this output. In that case, I can do a show VPC brief. Here again, you see a little bit more of a condensed version of this output. I can also look at an individual VPC link and do show VPC number 66. Now I'm just seeing that particular link, because when I get a lot of these configured on a switch, there can be quite a few there, especially if you're using FEXes. So it's very nice just to say show VPC, the VPC number that I'm concerned with, and that's what I'll see in my output. Another great command is show VPC consistency parameters global. Now, I mentioned before that there are certain configurations on the switch that need to be the same for the VPC peers. And this command will show you whether those configurations are in fact the same and whether or not you have any inconsistencies between the switch. If you do have some inconsistencies, you'll probably see that in the show VPC command with a type 1 or a type 2 consistency issue. Another command that we talked about was the show VPC role command. This gives me the status of my device, and I can see that this device is the VPC role of secondary. Remember, VPC peers don't preempt, so if they fail over and the secondary now becomes the primary, if the previous primary comes up online, the roles don't fail back over. The previous primary will now become the active secondary. The final config that we want to take a look at is our show running config VPC. Nexus is really great about breaking out specific configurations for certain features, and in this case I only want to see the running config that relates to my VPC configuration. So I'm going to do show running config VPC, I press enter, and I see only the running config that relates to my VPC configuration. It's very great and useful command for troubleshooting. Please join me for the next lesson, configuring Fabric Path.